Right, so normally I wouldn't give the comic book that passes itself off as a newspaper called the Daily Express a second glance. Its content often the most far-fetched silliness going. However, a story they have picked up on is getting carried by other right-wing sources as well, it has to be said, so perhaps on this rare occasion there might be something in this and is worth talking about. And what they are onto is absolute Tory panic, as overnight it is being reported that a group of incandescent Tories are racing against the clock to stop the general election from happening in July. It doesn't matter if they hold it in July or hold it 3 months later. As a party, they are done for. And actually, there's a small part of me that hopes they succeed, because if they do, the damage to them will be all the greater in the end. But can they actually stop it? And how can they do that when the king has already given his assent? Right, so clearly Rishi Sunak, our erstwhile drowned rat of a Prime Minister, has finally, it seems, found a shiver for his spine and called the general election for the 4th of July. However, it also seems that this has all happened as a bit of a surprise to many in his party. He had informed his cabinet ahead of this announcement, we're told, so they all knew, but the backbenchers, fearing for their seats, as they rightly should be, I imagine, are not happy at all at the prospect of democracy removing their sorry hides from the gravy train they've been happily riding at our expense. As such, overnight reports have come in that a group of Tories, unnamed of course, so obviously caveats there, that a group of Tories anyway, seeing this move by Sunak as absolute madness, and Nick Watt of Newsnight was the person they went to apparently, posted possibly the most BBC explainer possible, explaining the reaction to Sunak's announcement. A Tory rebel source tells me letters are going in calling for a no-confidence vote in Rishi Sunak after reports of an imminent general election announcement. Another Tory source. Panic in the tea room. Nobody was expecting this. Everyone mortified, the source told me. Don't you just love how afraid of democracy this bunch are? You're flailing in the polls, so somehow we have to stop this happening. But he's going to help you. Letters of no confidence is the answer, they say. Let's install yet another unelected, mandateless Prime Minister who can then call this election off. That's the answer. It really isn't. That's not what the people of this country want. People across this country are absolutely sick of you. 14 years of absolute misery, and people are desperate. Even former Tory voters desperate to give you lot your marching orders. But this time, the Tories are against the clock to do this stunt again, if they're going to pull this off. Previously, when they've done this, we've seen the Tories take weeks to pick their new leader and inflict another Prime Minister on the country that nobody voted for by default. Because as much as we only officially vote for a local MP in our elections, who will be Prime Minister still shapes the thinking of many people when they go to vote. This time they won't be able to do that. The dissolution of Parliament is happening as things stand next Thursday, 30th of May. So the campaign begins officially on the 31st. So a new Prime Minister or caretaker would need to be installed by then. Therefore, there can be no contest. No time for that. Or can there? I'll come back to that prospect in a moment. But for my point here, they would need around somebody that all the disparate, fractured wings of the Tory party, from the One Nation Tory types to the ERG, they could all agree on and fear for their own seats. Well, that would be a unifying issue, I suppose, for this group of the most self-serving politicians going. This nasty self-serving bunch like they are, though obviously should the remote possibility exist that the Tories can still win this election, there will likely be further dissent over that leader once in power again. Strong and stable, it would be anything but. Of course, to even get that far, the letters of no confidence have to go in and be sufficient in number to trigger that vote of no confidence. A threshold must be reached. Apparently, since Sunak's announcement, they've indeed been flying in. So in the sweetness stakes, nothing quite tops starting a general election like the prospect of the Tory leader facing a no-confidence vote right before it gets off the ground. Why should the public vote for Sunak when even his own parliamentary colleagues want him out? Great optic, guys. Truly first class. This is a way to hang on to power and get elected. So where we are, with a week to go, apparently, is letters going in. They really need to hit target today, therefore, which several Tory sources are claiming will happen, and then it is a case of the 1922 committee chairman Graham Brady to tell us all that the threshold has been met. 52 letters, I believe it is, at this moment in time. Now, Tory MP Simon Clarke said back in March that the threshold had nearly been met, so how many more letters are actually needed to hit target? Well, we don't know for sure. We never know, because Graham Brady is the keeper of the letters. He is the only one who knows, and it is at his discretion as to when he announces that threshold has been met. So, although desperate Tories might be sending letters in, there's no guarantee Brady will do anything with them before next Thursday. There's nothing forcing him to that I can see. Brady himself is stepping down at the next election, so on the flip side, he might announce the threshold has been met straight away. He's got nothing to lose himself. He gets a few more months on MP's wages if he gets stalled, but equally he might be ready to just shuffle off now and prefer that option. There's no forcing that I can see when a declaration of a vote of no confidence has to happen once that threshold is reached. So these letters can keep going in. The threshold might get met, and Brady still waits to announce until after next Thursday, after the dissolution of Parliament, to announce that. And not a thing can be done about it then, since at that point there are no MPs anymore. Parliament's dissolved. Of course, there is another possibility, another angle we could look at to this story, is that upon getting wind of Sunak calling the general election, there are reports that in itself has triggered more letters of no confidence. The very fact that he called the election has triggered more letters. And Sunak calling it yesterday, in the pouring rain, as we noted, hardly the most opportune moment to do it. He could have waited another day or two, surely, you might think, until there was better weather. But maybe he really couldn't. If Brady had given him the heads up that the threshold had been reached, as is customary, then Sunak calling the election when he did was his last gasp attempt to hang on to power. I'm not completely sold on this idea. There are reports that Sunak has not been happy in the role for a while too, but again, that could just be providing cover for the fact the threshold's been met. He hasn't turned things around for his party. None of his horrible policy announcements have resonated. He'd have done better to have called an election after he got in and was still in a relative honeymoon period, but instead he did a Gordon Brown and has been punished for that in part. His policies have also been rancid, rotten and racist, of course. There's no getting away from the fact he has been a chronically awful Prime Minister, though. But let's assume that the letters are in and Brady announces this swiftly. What happens then? Well, as I said, they need a new PM and they need a new single candidate to just walk into the role at this point. No time for a contest. But even if they install somebody, say Penny Mordaunt, for example, her name was being bandied about a while back. Let's just pick her as a for instance. Can she actually stop it still? Sunak has already been to see old sausage fingers himself, the king. His assent has been given to dissolve Parliament. But the writs to actually do so are not yet written. And dissolution is still a week away, therefore. Installing a new leader, if they can do it in time, can choose to revoke the election, in theory. That would again require informing the king of that intention, and the intention to form a government again, based on what's already there, and ask his permission to do so, under the so-called Lascelles principles, which govern the actions the king can or cannot take in this instance when it comes to dissolving Parliament. There remains the theory, at least, that he could refuse to revoke or assent to a new unelected government. The grounds to do so would be that he would feel this would be an affront to democratic rights. And I think there is a case for that in this scenario, certainly. But then that opens up a whole constitutional can of worms, and Charles may not choose to go there. If he agrees, though, then the election is off. It's completely new territory here, never been done before stuff, this. Now, another possibility is that the Tories will spend the summer actually having a leadership contest if Sunak gets deposed. He still has to lose that vote of no confidence, of course. That's just the assumption I've made until this point. Though I struggle to see how, frankly, he would survive one. But instead of agreeing a single new Prime Minister between the disparate Tory groups, they agree a caretaker candidate specifically chosen to just call the election off, and then trigger a summer-long leadership contest, whilst trying somehow to turn their fortunes around, whilst they very publicly show how badly they are yet again falling apart. You can imagine how popular that will continue to make them not. Whether these Tory rebels actually succeed or not, the damage is still getting done anyway. Just the fact this is being talked about is damaging them still. Sunak being undermined damages them still. A vote of no confidence as we go into a general election would be catastrophic for them. They've got 14 years of lying and wrecking the country that they have to try and defend, and calling the election off for a new leadership contest will practically have people taking up torches and pitchforks, I should think. If they go down this road, they still by law have to call the general election by the end of next January anyway. They are just delaying the inevitable for a matter of months and making matters even worse for themselves going down this route. So for that reason, I don't mind if it ends up coming to pass, though I fancy the odds of this are extremely remote. I really don't think it's going to happen. I really don't think there's time for it. I don't think, frankly, the mechanisms in place would have a bar of it. An awful lot of ducks need to get in a row to pull this off. But ultimately, the Tories will lose even more badly if they delay it now. But if they just suck it up and take it on the chin, as one of their former leaders famously said about what we had to do. Meanwhile, I covered Sunak getting drenched calling the election in this video recommendation here. You've no doubt seen plenty of coverage of this already, but here's my take on it. And if you've got this far, I'd like to think you enjoyed the content. Perhaps enough to like, share and subscribe while you're here and watch a bit more of the channel, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.